Good morning. Morning. Thanks for joining us. I know we have a few people who are delayed this morning. I think the traffic and with the rain and the weather has slowed a few people down, but we don't want to keep those of you who have busy schedules today. So thank you for being here. My name is Julie Hennigan, and I'm the president of the Steely Group, and I'd like to welcome you today. Just a quick reminder, if you have your cell phones on, if you could either turn them on, turn them off, or turn them on vibrate, that would be appreciated. Today's topic is Ask the C-Suite, how does HR keep its seat at the table? Before we get started, I'd like to thank Kevin Dopkin and Career Builder for sponsoring the breakfast portion of today's event. Thank you, Kevin. We're very excited today about today's program, and it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. Bob Currie, to my left, is president of Community Care Alliance of Illinois. Community Care Alliance is a managed care company serving people with disabilities and seniors on Medicaid and Medicare. Bob has more than 35 years of experience in managed health care, financial leadership, strategic planning, and business development in diverse healthcare organizations. Prior to joining CCAI, Bob was the COO of Aetna Better Health of Illinois. Thanks for being with us today, Bob. Amanda Lannert, who's next to Bob, is the CEO of the Jellyvision Labs. Under Amanda's leadership, Jellyvision has doubled its revenue 3 out of the last 4 years and has grown to serve hundreds of mostly Fortune 1000 clients with interactive communication solutions for desktop, mobile, and emerging platforms via the company's digital agency work and Alex, which is Jellyvision's benefit counselor. Amanda has been honored with numerous awards, including the 2015 Moxie Awards CEO of the Year. Congratulations, Amanda. To the left of Amanda is Jeff Yordon. Jeff has more than 45 years of experience as a senior level executive in the pharmaceutical industry. Jeff was recently named president of the newly formed Specialty Products Division at Athenex. Prior to joining Athenex, Jeff was founder, chairman, and CEO of Sagent Pharmaceuticals. Jeff has successfully taken 4 companies public in the United States, and in 2011, he was named Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. In 2014, Jeff was inducted into the Chicago Entrepreneur Hall of Fame and was recently appointed to the Chicago Innovation Council. Thanks for being here today, Jeff. So many of you know our moderator today, Tracy Goldthwait, who's with the Steely Group. Tracy's our senior vice president, and Tracy provides operational leadership, and she also spearheads our firm's human resources practice. Tracy has almost 25 years of industry experience. She delivers strategic human resource recruitment solutions to hundreds of companies on a national level. So we're pleased to have Tracy moderate for us today. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, everyone, and good morning. So happy to see you all here. As you just heard from Julie's opening remarks, we've assembled quite a group of panelists today. Our CEOs have a number of notable successes under their belt. In addition to that, I think they bring some great diversity to our discussion today. They represent healthcare, they represent the pharmaceutical industry, digital marketing, some coming from nonprofit, some coming from for-profit, both private and publicly traded organizations. And we wanted to have that balance here for you today because we think that we recognize that everyone who's here is coming from a different environment as well. So hopefully we can speak to lots of different ideas and insights that will be something you can take away from our conversation. The one thing they do have in common, however, is that they have developed organizations at warp speed. And in order to do that and grow as quickly as some of these organizations have grown, you need to be in lockstep with your HR team, your HR leadership team. So what we've also done today is we have asked them to bring their HR leadership teams with them. So we are joined by Beth Wynn, Mary Beth is the VP of People for Jellyvision and Amanda's HR partner. We have John Matthei, who is the VP of HR for Gibsons now, but previously was a partner to Jeff Yordon at Sagent Pharmaceuticals. And I'm sure in a few moments, getting through the rain, we will have Jason Hutton here, who is Bob Currie's HR VP of Human Resources and HR partner. So what we'll do today is we'll be posing questions not just to our CEOs, but to their respective HR leadership here as well. And so hopefully we can offer some great insight from both groups. So while the title of our seminar is How HR Keeps Its Seat at the Table, we also recognize that not everybody in the room may be at the table quite yet. So we'll also make sure that we sort of drive our discussion toward those who may already be sitting at the table, as well as those who are working diligently to get to the table. Okay? And in the end, as always, we'll open up for Q&A at the end. So let's begin with a report by the Cranefield Network on international human resource management. They did this report in collaboration with the Society of Human Resources Management, and the report revealed that HR is now more likely to have a place on the board of directors or a similar executive team, up from 41% in 2004 to 66% in 2015. That is some significant growth and some significant representation at the executive table. And with the majority of HR departments remaining involved in the development of business strategy, either from the outset or entirely through to consultation. So, great to see that percentage growing and growing at such a fast pace, Bob. I'm going to begin with you. You have the unique experience of working now for a nonprofit, but having been a part of a Fortune 100 as well as a Fortune 500 organization. You've worked with HR teams that probably numbered a couple of hundred, and as small as a team of 20. So I'd love to hear when you hear that the HR representation at the board in the boardroom has grown so significantly. I'd like to know from your perspective, what do you think are the factors that have led to that increase?
Thank you for having me here. That's a pretty easy one to address. Early on in a career, I recognized the importance that the success of the company and that growth was really very dependent upon having a HR team that could bring the type of diversity and individuals that would be instrumental in that growth. But it needed to happen with them at the table with you. So although in some instances, such as my stint at Aetna and WellCare and others, early on where there may not have been HR people at the board level, with our senior team, the most senior leadership, the C team, if you will, and I always had a recruitment person there, a chief recruiting officer, I call that the Crow, as part of the C team. So it wasn't just the CEO and the COO and your chief marketing officer, but we had a chief recruiting officer there so that they were on a real-time basis participate in the discussions that we had in the longer-term strategy, both short-term and long-term strategies. So I think it's many of the heads of these companies quickly came to the realization of the value for having that type of expertise and that counsel in those discussions. So from the very beginning, they were part of the crafting, development of the strategies that you thought were going to be instrumental for the long-term success. So I'm not surprised at all to see that growing. I think the value has been clearly documented. It's been, for those that look at analytics and quantitative types of markers, it's clear that it's been a huge benefit, and I would certainly encourage anyone that hasn't gotten on board yet of the train to seriously consider doing that.
Okay, very good. And Jeff, we heard obviously in the introduction that you've just joined a new organization, Athenex, as their president. And once again, you're going to be growing an organization, right, from the ground up. I know you had shared some great stories with me through our conversations. I think you initially started recruiting out of a Starbucks with one of the organizations you took the helm of years ago. And obviously, you've had that experience of working with a number of different HR teams as well. And I think probably everyone has had a great experience with HR, and then maybe that one didn't quite live up to their expectations. But in your experience, Jeff, I'd love to know, why you two think that there's been a significant increase of HR representation in the boardroom.
Let me start by saying that I have a unusual philosophy. It's almost unheard of. When it comes to the customer, I ask the customers what they want, and they tell me what they want, and then I do what they tell me to do. That's incredibly unique in almost any industry, and I'm not being sarcastic. And I do the same thing with my management team. It's consensus management, and when I hire somebody like a John, I'm not hiring somebody who can simply administer benefits. Number one, I think one of the most important people in an organization, particularly when you're growing, we were growing at unbelievable speeds. Do we have the right people? Is the message resonating throughout the industry or throughout the company? Where are we weak? And more importantly, as you get more and more experience on what we're doing, you should be someone also that has the right, I'm using that word very, very carefully, to suggest things outside of just being HR people. I expected him, here's a philosophy, we're going with this Italian company, what do you think? And part of what I expected from him is, I don't think it's going to work for the following reason, or I think it's going to work. Not just that, I successfully helped some people get some insurance claims today. So.
Right, exactly. And Amanda, you come from Jellyvision, an organization that's been completely applauded for its culture as well as its product and its people. And you've got an HR leader who's won a number of awards herself. Tell us from your perspective, and again, your background coming from Leo Burnett prior to Jellyvision, what do you think is one of the leading factors to why we're seeing this increased representation in the boardroom of HR professionals?
So I'll put it into historical perspective. My first job out of college was in 1994. I joined Leo Burnett, and I was not given a computer. I had a secretary who typed stuff on a typewriter. I redlined it, and he retyped it. And if something was important, you faxed it. Flash forward a mere 20-odd years later, and we all have a personal computer in our hands at all times that has unbelievable processing power. I think because of what's happened in the last 20 years with technology, product, process, patents are no longer truly sustainable competitive advantages. Truly sustainable competitive advantages around people, customer service, and culture. Ideas. You need humans to want to come and stay at your workplace to be truly competitively advantaged in the long term. Simply because technology has made everything too easy to copy. And that's why I think HR has a seat at the table. It's really a people-based economy now.
Very good. Some of you may have read the 2012 piece on Netflix entitled How Netflix Reinvented HR. It's a 127-slide PowerPoint presentation that was created as an internal document and in a short period of time became a viral document, and it's now been viewed over 15 million times. You can easily find it on the web. We'll have a resource, a link to it on our website later today. The presentation was authored by Patty McCord, who was Netflix's Chief Talent Officer for 12 years, and their CEO, Reed Hastings. And this document, they believe, shaped the culture and motivated performance at the Internet Television Network. It consisted of 5 core ideas that have defined the way Netflix attracts, retains, and manages talent. Those ideas are hire, reward, and tolerate only fully formed adults. I love that one. Mm-hmm. It's my personal favorite. Tell the truth about performance. Managers own the job of creating great teams. Leaders own the job of creating great company culture. Good talent managers think like business people and innovators first, and like HR people last. So with that last talking point, good talent managers think like business people and innovators first, and like HR people last. I'd like to ask our panel, can you share an example of how your HR leadership team has done that? Or, because they're all wonderful, that's why we have them here. Or inversely, if there was a time in your past, in your career as a CEO, where an HR leadership team did not think like business people first, and how that impacted your organization. Jeff, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Okay, yeah, I've given this one a little bit of thought. The last company, Sagent, I raised about $166 million in private equity. So when we took the company public, we had to do a 6-for-1 reverse split. And this became an unbelievable problem with my entire workforce. And what people couldn't understand is that they would say, you know, I have 1,000 shares of stock, and if it goes up $1, I make $1,000. And now you say I have 200 shares of stock, and if it goes up $1, I make $200. And then we're trying to teach them that unless we do that, it won't go up $1. It won't go up at all. And it was one of the most difficult things because it was almost impossible for people to understand. And it became, you know, my turnover since I've been doing this since 1970. My turnover on average was about 2% a year. Now that's either good or bad. Maybe it's not good, and maybe, but we've always had a family, and this was probably the most difficult situation we ever had to deal with, and John was involved, and having meetings, one meeting of which I ended up actually throwing somebody out of the meeting because they had no idea what they were talking about, but it was basically through his efforts, because it really didn't matter what I said, it mattered what happened in the closed door meetings when someone would come into one of my HR people's office, close the door and say, tell me the truth, am I getting screwed here? I mean, how does it work? And we turned it around, and people became happy with it, and the stock went from about $12 to $33, so it all ended up well. But that's a good example, I think, of how important that role is, and how important it is that that door is open. You said I've had some HR people that the door is open, nobody went in. Okay, and in my opinion, one of the most important sounding boards for all of our employees are people like you that have an open door, and they believe in you, and you're honest, and you'll tell the truth.
Oh, very good. Amanda, how about you? HR, business people, and innovators first.
So I think we should start by trying to address why would HR sort of be positioned as something you shouldn't be this, not this. And I think what gives HR a bad rap, which also gives IT, legal, procurement a bad rap, is that a lot of policies are set up to govern the lowest common denominator. Someone who made a mistake, someone who was difficult, someone who used bad judgment or bad integrity, and you create a series of rules to prevent that from ever happening again that in fact hamper everyone else from doing their job quickly and efficiently and meaningfully. And to me, what makes our HR great, which is also what makes our IT great and our procurement great and our legal great, is that they're not about reducing risk. They're about maximizing opportunity. They don't say we shouldn't because it could go wrong. They say, could we? Or what about? Other companies in the industry are doing this. Is there something we can learn? Being a student of industry and being very sort of future-oriented rather than like a protector of all the little things that can go wrong. Being trusting, being optimistic, hoping for the best, and also kind of looking at the horizon instead of just looking at today, and again, the lowest common denominator, look at the highest common denominator and figure out how to enable that. But I think that's where we get these departments that become the purveyors of no, the purveyors of red tape. That's what gives HR a bad name. It's not the case at Jellyvision, I can at least speak for that, but that's what would give HR a bad name.
Got it. Bob, how about you?
Well, first I'd like to say that study, I haven't seen it yet, that Netflix published. It sounds like an exciting one, so I'm going to rethink my canceling my Netflix subscription. My $7.99 a month is obviously going to a very good, worthwhile endeavor, so I'll keep it a little longer. But my perspective, and in terms of the talent group that I have here, we're in an industry, the MCO industry that we're in. We went from in September of 2014, not even 2 years yet, we have people that enroll. We're like an insurance company, but I don't really use the term insurance company. We're a care coordination company, so these are individuals who are enrolled through government programs, either Medicare or Medicaid, that come into health care. And then with the rollout of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, we're talking about millions more people coming into that change. So it really challenged all of the companies that were working in that space to gear up in very short order with very little prep time. So what has been heartening is that the team reads the tea leaves. They anticipated what the business need was going to be, and that we were now going to find ourselves in a highly competitive arena. For 20 years, Family Health Network was formed in 1995, so 21 years. There were only 2 large organizations operating that space. Overnight, we went from 2 companies to 17 companies operating in the same space for the same population. So it meant innovation, being at the end of the finish line before the competitors got there, knowing where the direction was going. And so having a team that could anticipate these changes from a business standpoint, and within that big movement, what were the needs of the company? An example would be a subtle shift from individuals who were necessarily just physicians. Our pipeline, we needed nurses, we needed LCSWs for social work, we needed rehab individuals. So for them to come in with a plan that anticipated that shift, that would put us ahead of the curve, was very meaningful and impactful. I think it has placed us where we are today, from September under 90,000 individuals in our plan to over 250,000 a day. We went from a company that was $90 million in revenue to $600 million in 2.5 years. So that was tremendous pressure and growth. But what has kept us at the leading edge was having a team that anticipated that from a business need, aligned us very well with the way the market went. And that's actually a very good story in terms of the successes that we've had. Without that type of anticipation, I doubt that we would have found ourselves where we are today, which is the largest MCO in that space in the government programs market.
Very good. And Jeff, you had touched upon something, and you were giving your example and about having the right person in the room and how they weren't communicating the right message around that stock split. And it makes me want to engage the 3 of you as well around the topic of communication, right? HR is responsible for being the voice of the organization along with the CEO, right? They're translating your strategy to the rest of the organization. We all know that that's critically important. What are some rules of thumb, if you will, and from your experiences about how that communication should happen, how often that should happen? What role does that play in creating a great culture?
Wow, how should that happen openly and honestly, with the benefit of the doubt for both parties and with non-defensiveness for the receiving party? We talk about feedback all the time as much art and science as science. I think you have to practice it. How often? Whenever you have feedback. We have something called the Schmutz Pact that we really use to try to talk about, to encourage people to give each other feedback in the moment. And we sort of use the example, have you ever been at lunch with someone, you notice they have like spinach in their teeth? And if you say, oh, you've got a little spinach in their teeth, what do they always say? Every time they say thank you. No one's like, how dare you say I have spinach in my teeth? They say thank you. They say thank you because feedback is kind. It is helpful. And we use these types of stories to sort of reinforce, like to say, hey, you could do your job better, or you could be a better employee, or a better boss, or a better boss's boss by doing X, Y, and Z. It's the Schmutz Pact. So we try to find ways to demystify giving feedback and show that you can, oh, thank you, that was helpful. I mean, I don't know if that's a great example, but there's no like rhythm, like every day, every 4 hours, it's in the moment when something comes up is what I would think we would suggest.
Excellent.
We talked about an open door policy, and I would encourage my HR person to come in actually on a daily basis to talk. We also, about every 8 weeks, had all-employee meetings. And the all-employee meetings, I'm one of these people that really believes that 90% of the things that everybody thinks is so confidential isn't that confidential. And if it's not, you share it with people, and you trust people, and you treat them like adults and like professionals. And somebody like John would walk in and said, I'm just making sure I'm on cue with these 4 things. And those are the things that him and his group would constantly discuss with people. So I don't think, I think, again, I've watched companies go from all the doors open to all the doors closed. And that's a pretty good indication of where communication is.
No, I'll just jump in. It's like the challenge is to go beyond open door, which is passive and it's on you. To me, get up out of your office, walk around and say, how are you doing? We have rules that all managers have to have one-on-ones with their employees every week where they say, how are you doing? How is your team doing? How's the work going? I think it's much more active, because if the onus is always just on the employee to come to you, more likely than not they won't. You have to seek the fire. You have to seek the pain.
And to that point, it's a great point. We become so comfortable with email, so comfortable with email that I can't tell you how many times I said, why didn't you get up and walk into the office that's 2 offices down and talk about it? Never thought about it. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
You know, from my perspective, in terms of the open door, if you will, and no offense, but sometimes it's lost some of its meaning. It's a little cliche said. The first thing we always say, I have an open door policy. Come on in, doors closed. I think the key here is empowering that team in my HR area so they absolutely know that on my very worst day, they should feel free to come in and talk to me on my very worst day. And it's expected that if they have something that needs to be communicated, that they absolutely have the power to come in and share and talk with me in a two-way street. And an extension, as CEO, that they are also empowered to carry those messages forward. They have that responsibility to do that and can feel quite confident when they share things that they will have the support and the backing from my senior leadership team and myself as well. And I think it creates a different type of a culture where they don't have to second guess or do they need to utter something. They have been given the absolute empowerment to carry those messages forward.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to go ahead and turn our conversation to the wonderful HR leadership that we have here today. So, John, I'm going to begin with you. So you supported Jeff as his head of HR when you both worked at Sagent Pharmaceuticals, and you have now moved to a new organization, Gibsons, where again, you find yourself with a seat at the table. For the people in the audience who are working diligently at getting to that point, what advice would you have for them as far as, when you think about the path that you've traveled to get there? Maybe more than the advice, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome in getting there? Great, yeah.
I could probably do it without having to use this. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, great. Well, I think I look back at my career, and I didn't start in HR. I started in marketing and sales. And so I looked at that as a benefit I received of having a business experience before going into HR. So I think being able to talk business and being able to be a business partner, and I think that's overused these days, of what sort of a business partnership, what does that mean? I think business first.
You need to use that mic in order for us to.
Okay, sorry. I will use this then. So I think, that approach for me is always think business first. And it's not that easy. We're trained as HR professionals. We have a toolkit that kind of put everything in a box and kind of think through it in this certain way. I think kind of throw that aside, think through the business obstacles and the business challenges first, and then be that partnership, and then figure out how do you align that HR toolkit with helping that happen. And so, I saw something at SHRM. SHRM has a financial for HR professionals. So learn finance. And I said, why for HR? Go take a financial course. don't pigeonhole yourself in that framework of an HR person. You got to get out of that. And I think so that's really the biggest thing. I don't think what I think is typical HR ways. I think about business. And
Yeah.
that's been actually the tool that's allowed me to expand and grow.
You had shared something with me in one of our conversations, about the road up the mountain and the
Oh.
guardrail. And I thought that was a really great analogy. And I think if more people adopted that mindset as HR leaders, the more successful some of them might be. I was hoping you could share that.
Sure. So I've worked a lot in my career with entrepreneurs and startups, and they think differently. They have to. They kind of think out of the box. They're not set with rules and regulations. And I think one of my first big jobs as a VP of HR, overseeing an organization, the first thing my boss said to me is, if you come to me with a policies and procedures manual, all nice and neat in a binder and plop it on my desk, you failed me. And I said, okay, so how do I think of this differently? I went back and I said, okay, I'm going to come back and say this. We're going to build policies and procedures, but we need something that kind of gives the framework to help us to make sure people don't fall off the cliff. So I use the analogy that we're going to build a 4-lane highway going up a mountain, 2 lanes coming down, 2 lanes going up. We're not even going to put a speed limit on this, but I'm going to build the guide rail to make sure no one falls off the side. And that clicked. So from then on, we were able to actually work together.
Yeah, excellent. Great analogy. Thanks, John.
Great, thanks.
Mary Beth, you think about all the obstacles that you've encountered along the way.
You know, I think I've been very fortunate that I haven't really encountered obstacles in that this is my first HR recruiting role. I have a somewhat varied background. I was an attorney. I did career counseling for law students. And then I joined Jellyvision. And Jellyvision already had the mindset. There are a lot of things I can't take credit for at Jellyvision. I came into an organization that already had the idea that our people were absolutely our number one asset. And we were going to treat them the way we wanted to be treated, and had a very, very different approach. I think I've encountered a lot more micro problems. Things like I got to Jellyvision and I said, and having come out of, I'd been working at a law school, counseling law students, and had a lot of experience with internship programs from the student side. I was like, wow, why don't we have an internship program? And everybody was like, oh, because interns are they're more trouble than they're worth, right? Like they take so much training, and we're a really scrappy, fast-moving startup, and we don't have time. And I was like, gosh, that is short-term thinking, because if you want a pipeline of talent for the future, we've got to be on college campuses. And we built an internship program that turned into an apprenticeship program that's accounting for about 1/3 of our hiring this year. So I think the company, I didn't have any roadblocks to being at the table. And I think the Jellyvision vision of HR, Amanda and I had absolutely the same vision. I didn't have roadblocks there. But it's interesting because you think of entrepreneurial startup environments as so forward-thinking and entrepreneurial, but even small companies can get set in their ways. Like, oh, we do this thing this way. And that can be as entrenched as at a big company that's been doing something for a long time. And so I think that's really important in HR, that you keep saying, well, why are we doing it that way? Well, wait, let me challenge you that, and let's make sure that what we're doing isn't something that worked in a 50-person company that's not going to work in a 300-person company, and if that's where we're heading, let's make sure we're doing what we need there.
Yeah. Well, and if I may, as a follow-up to that, I remember from our conversation, we had talked about when it came to policies and procedures, you two very specifically don't have a lot when it comes to HR, and that's by design. And it's funny because some people might say, okay, that's only going to work in a small organization. Yet as you research that line of thinking, you're finding more and more large, and I mean really large organizations starting to adopt that ideology or that practice. If you could elaborate a little bit on that, share that with the audience.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, and I think it's like, if you look at, there's so much about testing in kids' schools, right? And like you establish the test and everybody teaches to the test. Everything becomes about this, like what you've written down is what everybody's working to. And I think if you do too much with written procedures, written policies, have to follow these steps, that's what everybody moves to, that's what everybody is paying attention to, and that's usually not where you want people's time and attention to be focused. You want time and attention to be on big issues. So Amanda will always say, like, the bedrock of all of our policies should be use good judgment, right? Sometimes you need to elaborate a little bit more to give some guidelines. In this particular situation, we think use good judgment looks like this, but the bedrock is just use good judgment and not a whole bunch of really, really detailed stuff. And people always say to me, we have an quote unquote unlimited vacation policy, and that's clearly not true. If you stop showing up for work and never come back, you don't have a job anymore. But, what it means is we have no administrative burden of like tracking vacation days. We don't grant or accrue them. People take the paid time off that they need. When they're sick, they stay home. When they're on vacation, they're on vacation. People don't abuse it. I mean, we have a really highly motivated group of people who care deeply about doing a good job, who care deeply about not leaving their coworkers in the lurch by taking off and not providing for getting their work done in their absence. And people are always like, well, that worked when you're small. It's not going to work when you're bigger. But we keep hiring the same kinds of people. So, we hired people who could be responsible enough to live under that when we had 50 people, and now we're approaching 300. And we've got close to 300 people who can live by that guideline and be responsible for their work. And it's what Amanda said earlier, if you're making your policies for the lower common denominator, if we hire someone who can't handle that responsibility, the reaction should not be make a policy, the reaction should be part ways with that person.
Right. Goes back to that concept of the fully formed human, right?
Yep.
Adult, right?
Absolutely.
Use good judgment as a policy. I stole completely from Netflix, and they do. We've done business with them, and they really do operate that leanly, and there is total autonomy, and there's no red tape. I mean, it's amazing to see how fast they're moving as a large organization, and I think it's that kind of stuff that allowed them to pivot. Very rarely can people walk away from their core competency. Look at Kodak or Blockbuster. Their core competency was logistics around shipping DVDs. They saw the market change, and because they use good judgment, don't be afraid, no red tape, they completely flipped what they're good at, and now are a titan of streaming. And I say that as a student of industry, but they really do they hire only adults, only senior people, and then they give them incredible discretion to spend and do and risk, which I admire. So we're trying to bring those principles back to a much smaller company.
Yeah. One more question for our esteemed HR leaders. Was there a point in your career where you felt as though suddenly that path became a lot clearer to the table, or where sort of something clicked, and maybe it was the relationship that you have with your CEO? But I'd be curious to know if there was a specific event in your professional career where you felt.
Looking at me. I don't think so for me. Again, I think it's been the approach that, it's even hard for me to assess the fact that how do you get a seat at the table, because I never saw that as my mission. My mission was to be a strong partner to the business. So you do that, it kind of comes. It's someone in life, and I know you've probably heard this before, but so do what you like and the rest will follow. That's kind of the philosophy I went through. So are there individual obstacles? Certainly, and there's challenges. I've made a lot of choices to go to new companies and help them build their infrastructure and move forward. There's a lot of obstacles in that when you're new and they haven't had my approach. And I don't know if my approach will work with them. So it's that kind of courting time that you're back and forth and trying to figure out what's going to work. And I also don't anticipate that what worked in my past organization, or even in the same organization a month ago, will work as we're going forward. So I think just keeping an open mind and listening, getting involved in the business activities. Challenges sometimes are getting people to talk to you if you're the HR guy and you want to talk about marketing. Why am I talking to you about marketing? Well, that's a lunch conversation. Get them to understand you kind of know what you're talking about, or you're interested, and then those conversations happen again. If you try to do that in an office, they might kind of go, don't tell me how to do my job, you're the HR guy. So I think those are the things that I look for. And there's no real kind of smoke and mirrors. It's do your job well as a business partner, the rest comes.
Well, and I'm thinking back to, Jeff, you had made a comment about when you were talking about John and when he had been your HR leader, about how people, when they were in the boardroom, never realized that John was an HR guy. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And why should they?
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, I actually just had a conversation. This sparked something. I had a gentleman who's a new president of a division, $1 billion division, and he and I worked in the past. And he called me, and he's building his team. And he was kind of, how do I do this, John? What do I need to think about? And I said, well, it's important to you. And we had this conversation. And I said, well, why don't you go to the HR person you have? Well, they just want to fill the position. They want me to write a job description. It's more than a job description. I don't know what I need. So we talked a long time, and that came up. He goes, finally he said, I want to be in a meeting where everybody at the table talks. If anybody walked in, you wouldn't know what position they held because they all are talking about the business. I said, okay, that's the way you got to write this and look for those people. So, I think that's a good insight. If you can do that and have that, and if you're one of those people, you'll gain credibility very fast.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if I can point to a specific moment, although there are definitely a couple of things that I learned about Jellyvision, after I got there, and I was kind of figuring my way forward. One thing was, like my first year there, we finally hit 50 people, and Amanda was like, we can apply for cranes. And so I'm like doing the paperwork, and it turns out not all 50 of our people are in Chicago, and you need 50 people in Chicago to apply, right, to be a candidate for Crane's Best Places to Work. And I had this moment of like, I am a stickler. I'm a stickler for everything, right? Like I do things by the book. I do not lie. And I was like, I've got to go back to my CEO and say, I know we have 50 people, but we don't have 50 people in Chicago, so we can't do this. And I had this moment of, is she going to be like, just do it, Mary Beth, right? and am I going to be compromised? And, and is she going to think I'm crazy for caring so deeply about, doing everything right? And I told her, and she was like, okay, we apply next year. And I was like, oh, I can be here, and I can speak up, and I'm not going to have to worry about being told. And I think if you lead with ethics from the top of the organization, I think that really empowers the people under you to work ethically. And so that was an important moment for me to hear. I'm going to speak up no matter how stupid it is. When it's important to me and how I'm going to do my job, I'm going to speak up, and I know that I'm going to hear like, well, of course we're going to do it right. Of course we're going to do it ethically. And then there was another moment when we got so busy after maybe 8 months after I was hired. Amanda was like, what are you doing? You're working more than I do. Hire someone. And I was like, I can hire someone? And she was like, yes, just tell me when you need to hire someone. And I was like, oh, okay. And getting that empowerment of you don't have to do it, you just have to plan for the future and tell me what you need. Was like, okay, I can have a bigger picture. And then simply, I think Jellyvision has a culture of great ideas can come from anywhere. So simply offering ideas, and when we started having senior leadership meetings and being in that room and being able to hear, I think, I do recruiting and HR, and I think the recruiting component means that you are talking to every department in the company, and you know what everyone is doing and what they need. And when you sit at that table and you hear somebody saying, oh, this is going on, you have the knowledge of another area that they may not, to be like, wait, hold on, this makes sense, you guys need to talk, you have a 360 perspective on the business that I think not all senior leaders get because they're focused on their area. And seeing that I could say, you two need to talk about X because I'm hearing this from here. So it's not necessarily me doing it, it's me having the 360 view and knowing who needs to be talking about what that I think is really makes it effective.
Yeah, and that goes right back to that being a business person first, right? And an innovator, and having that communication, making yourself available to the different aspects of the organization, understanding what each group within the organization is responsible for, and then bringing all of that together. I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road, I guess, right? Jason, we're so glad you made it. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. The question that I pose to your fellow HR leaders here is, when you think back to the role that you were in when you first joined Family Health Network and Community Care Alliance, and what it's become today, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome, and share with us what the path looked like as you traveled down that path to get to your role today.
Good morning.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of obstacles.
Okay.
I think Keith Kutla, who's the CEO of the company, really invested in human resources from the get-go. He knew that the company was going to grow, so he sat down with me and he said, hey, you have two main priorities here. You need to recruit and you need to retain. That was basically what we needed to do. But I had to talk to them about, hey, listen, we can recruit and we can retain, but let's talk about retaining individuals. What is it that they really need to be retained? Is it the training and development piece? Is it the encouragement? Do we need managers to be trained on how to treat their employees? I mean, we can recruit and we can retain people, but we also have to think about the back office of that, making sure that the employees are engaged with their business. So he was really, really encouraged by what I had to say, one, and then once we put it to action, putting some training development classes together, making sure that people had what they knew, the tools needed, and then also making sure that the skill set met what the business was looking for. We can fill bodies with seats all day long, but as long as we have the right people and the right skill sets there, it worked out perfectly for us.
Very good. Well, and that is going to lead me to our next talking point about talent management. Thanks, Jason. Listening to a number of thought leaders discuss the future of HR, we often hear the term talent managers in place of HR. All three of you represent organizations that have gone through rapid growth. Many of you have experienced growth rates of over 50 or 100% year over year. So we've got a two-part question here. If we define talent management as both the procurement of talent, as well as the development of talent, can you share with us how your HR team's expertise in both aspects has been a factor to your organization's success? Bob, I'll start with you.
One of the things I wanted to touch on as I listened to the colleagues here, a telling moment I wanted to share because it will frame this for me. Was probably 20 years or so ago. There's a gentleman named Wally Hilliard who was president and CEO of American Medical Security out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and had just completed an acquisition here in Chicago at the time, and he was a capital partner. And I went to visit his operation there, and as we toured the facility, it was a beautiful facility in Green Bay, walking around, you see the different departments, and never did I run into a department that said HR. We got to this spot and it said the people department. Back then, he refused to use the word HR. It was called the people department. It was a place where discussions happened between team members and other folks. To your point, not a lot of structure and rules, and they were in the background, but it was to invite people in to be able to have those communications. And for me, that really struck me early in my career, having something, what that message sent out, that it was in that framework. So I tried to carry that forward in many ways. So recognizing that procuring talent management, is a significant part of our business. It has been instrumental in that growth. Jason was referring to Family Health Network, which has been around for a lot longer than I have been. That company was started in 1995. I joined it in 2014 with Community Care Alliance to grow that. But looking at that evolution of recognizing what, as the industry changed, what talent procurement strategies worked and which ones didn't work, and to their credit, align themselves with the business, understanding how business itself evolved, and building his own team around that, bringing in individuals out of the industry. As I shared with Tracy before, for me, the most important things as we look at talent management have to do with the passion that a person brings. We can teach and develop and train and educate those other aspects. There's absolutely very little requirement that says you must have A, B, C, D, E. Not that constricted. I think it's important that a person connects with what we're attempting to do through our vision and our mission that we have first and foremost. And that has been a winning part of that form and approach. And it strikes people sometimes, they take a step back. Are you real? Well, I'm absolutely serious about that. I know when we talk, it doesn't take long for me to connect with a person that truly understands what we're trying to accomplish, because our business is not one of commodity. We're in a people business. We are there to bring people health care, people that are most vulnerable around, seniors and persons with disabilities. So it takes a different type of person to come into the organization to connect in that way. And then we are absolutely committed and have a responsibility to continue that person's development and training education and make sure we had resources and the tools to do that. So for us, that is the difference maker.
Very good, very good. Amanda, how about you?
So three comments I'll kind of throw out related to talent management. The first is, a couple related to procurement. We look at offering jobs as the most important marketing we do. It is advertising. It is advertising to people who are going to give us the vast majority of their waking hours, and they're really talented. So we curate the recruiting experience as carefully as we would curate a $40 million marketing campaign. Job descriptions. This is like, hey, this is what you're going to do day in and day out. So frequently, they are so boring. They're so generic. These are commercials for your company. Never is boring the right strategy. So we spend a lot of time knowing who we are, trying to convey who we are, showing our values, trying to galvanize people most likely to be a fit, and how we place our ads, how we craft our ads, how we do job fairs, whatever we do. Spend a lot of time thinking about brand and marketing and how we source talent so that our type of people will say, hey, that's me, here I am. The second thing is, when it comes to interviewing, the best thing talent managers can do is ask a lot of questions and learn. If you're interviewing for project management, for example, you're probably going to talk to 50 people. You're going to hear about the best tools, the best practices, what's worked, what hasn't worked. Bringing that external knowledge inside, where people are really busy doing what we do, looking at today's problems, can be incredibly effective as tools and processes and best practices change. So be that touchstone for the hiring manager internally to say, I'm hearing about this a lot. You should look at this. It's incredible insight for the organization. And lastly, when managing people in-house, I think people think about management a lot as being therapist. How are you doing? How's stuff? But more than therapy, it's matchmaking. What are you great at? And what do you love to do? And when you're having a good day, what are you working on? And how can the organization best put you in that job? Rather than working on the 10% that you don't do well, how can we sort of create opportunities for the 90% that you rock to be 100% of your job? Now, it's easier when you have 300 people instead of 300,000 to have that kind of fluidity in the workplace. But to me, the best talent managers are always saying, the best place for you, my rockstar employee, may not even be on my team. And so the best interest of the company is to get you off my team, even though you get everything done and you rock it out and so on. So it's really, it's advertising, it's listening to best practices and bringing that domain knowledge in-house. And then it's matchmaking based on what people truly like to do and are truly good at, because that's how they'll do their best work.
Very good. Jeff, how about you?
I'm in a very niche business, and to be honest, our HR group, our people group, doesn't spend a great deal of time recruiting. We tend to find people, some of my average managers have 25 to 30 years of experience. They've done it before. My budget for training over the last 10 years is about $2. So what they do is talent managing. And unfortunately, when you hire the type of people that I hire, I've never been worried about hiring someone who can replace me, and many of them have, nicely or not nicely. They tend to build walls and machine gun turrets and put in landmines, and some of the biggest challenges is how do we manage those people? How do we get those people to realize the impact that they're having on other departments as they're doing their jobs, and they're doing a great job, but one of their big incentives is to get more stock options and to eventually succeed the CEO. And the last company, we probably had 6 people that loved me but would have been very happy if I stepped on one of those landmines, and they became CEO. So lots and lots of and this poor guy had to deal with 2 people that I'm sure in your entire career you've never had to deal. And I had those people reporting to me just for that reason, because they were phenomenal at what they did, and they were terrible at interacting with their peers. And the mistake that I made is I didn't get rid of them when I should have. You've made that point, Amanda, a couple of times. I kept weighing the pluses and the minuses, and I was wrong, that when you have a concern, cut your losses almost immediately. If you have a doubt and you're interviewing somebody, you don't hire them. These people, their contributions were amazing, and the destruction that they did in the company was also amazing. And so I'm publicly apologizing to John to have had to deal with what he had to deal with, because we're talking about psychologists and we're talking about having outside people trying to advise these people when it could have been easily taken care of by me just terminating.
We say talent is never worth toxic. It's never worth it. And you can get dazzled by what someone can do, but if they're difficult to coworkers, trust me, it's not worth it every time.
Well, why didn't you tell me that a couple of years ago?
You learn the lesson all the time. You have to say it as a mantra. It's a muscle that you build, that having the discipline to hold people accountable to all standards, not just most standards. It's a muscle built over time.
Very good. Excellent. And on the heels of talent management, you know, companies are hiring again, obviously. We're growing. The term, the talent crisis, is coming. You know, we forgot about that whole concept, right, for a few years there. And now I feel like it's really gaining traction again. And there is a looming talent crisis. And obviously, as the HR leaders of your organizations and as the leaders of your companies, finding the right talent is going to be a deal breaker or a deal maker, right, as you continue to fulfill your business strategies. So what is, or what should, a great HR leader be doing right now to be getting ahead of the pending talent crisis? And I'll pose that to either group. I'll open it up.
In our field, and I think I speak for most of the competitors in our space, the shift in crisis has gone from recruitment, because I think Jason and his team do a great job of identifying and bringing people. It's really the retention piece, keeping people. It is so highly competitive that a day does not go by when someone else is providing a sweetener or an alternative that's going to be very attractive to the individual that you have. So the development of philosophy that contains retention programs and benefits that one of your teammates see as being valuable for themselves and contributing to the team is at the top of that list. I talked about Richard Branson, who heads Virgin, when he talked about we should not be concerned or worry about developing individuals and preparing them for going somewhere else. Your talent is preparing them so they don't want to go somewhere else. And that's what's in front of us today, ensuring that we're in lockstep with that. And one of the tools that I use, not to go into too long, is the satisfaction surveys that we get from our employees. And as I work through reams and reams of the results, I quickly get past the things that say, oh, we got a great CEO, and we like our manager here. I want to get to the stuff where we can improve, where we're not doing well, where we're not resonating in a way. And I want Jason and his team to make sure that I don't miss those things when they present that information. They have it open to bring that to me. That is the only way we are going to be able to resonate, connect in a way to focus on those programs and those supports that are meaningful and impactful to our employees themselves.
So for me, I'll say as a CEO of a tech company, the talent crisis is here. We hired 10% of the engineers we planned to. We underspent by millions of dollars that we didn't want to underspend by. We're on the top 10 list of companies to work for according to Cranes, and we are begging, looking for talent out there, and they're busy heads down working on jobs they love where they're really well compensated. Tech salaries went up for us 40% over the last 2.5 years. Talent crisis is here, at least for us, for what we do in almost every department. There are 3 things we've looked at that have been helpful. One, we recently did churn, people leaving by department. And we're looking at it, and the lowest department, the highest retention rate was in a department that did a lot of pathing people into other departments. And so thinking about intercompany hiring as a retention tool, where people can then hop into new apartments knowing Jellyvision, knowing the culture, knowing our business, knowing our product, knowing our customers, is a great way to help retain talent. Second thing I'd say is transparency in who you are and how you work. We spend a lot of time blogging, showing pictures of the culture. Press is a lot about our culture. But being transparent so people can sort of self-identify and see that looks like a place where I'd want to work. And then when we can't find talent, we create it. Mary Beth talked about the internship turned apprentice program. We're actually working now with Deb Bootcamp, where we take people who seem to have an aptitude for code, we pay for them in part and give them time off of work to go to developer boot camps, and then bring them back as engineers. So we're in fact creating the workforce out of our own talent when we can't find it. And I think you have to be that aggressive and that innovative, because most people are really well treated because they're so highly sought after and in demand. So you have to be creative about almost creating your own workforce. And I would say along those lines, I heard the CEO of Kraft give a talk, and she said the most important skill is a self-adaptive learner, like being a self-motivated learner. And I think that if you look for that as a skill for any hire, they can help you figure out how to solve your problems more efficiently when new bodies are hard to find.
We're entering a very interesting phase. Through my previous experience, particularly in Asia, we have been able to get money from the Chinese government, $300 million, and $200 million from the state of New York, with the promise that we're going to be hiring a lot of employees. In the Buffalo area, we're going to hire 1,200 people. We're building 2 facilities. That is going to be unbelievably challenging. And even more challenging is we're building a 500,000 square foot facility in Chongqing, which most people don't realize is one of the biggest cities in the world. But unfortunately, young people that we would like to attract don't want to live in Chongqing. They want to live in Shanghai and Beijing. So to try to get them to move, we're going to be really facing, I'm going to spend most of June trying to figure out ways of how do we actually get people that can contribute of those 1,200 people rather than just fill 1,200 people and hire them. So it's going to be a colossal, and also I have to be honest, the prospect of moving to Buffalo isn't overly exciting to me as well. But Andrew Cuomo a couple of weeks ago made the big announcement that we're, and they've come up with the money, and we're building these beautiful facilities, and it's really a tremendous thing to be able to build and get equipment for free. But we have to do our side of it, so we're going to be going through a lot of time with our HR professionals to fill 2,400 jobs in the next year and a half.
Very good. Okay. I think everyone in the room is certainly familiar with EY. It's a multinational professional services firm, considered a Big Four audit organization, third largest professional services firm in the world. And EY says that when people complain about their HR department, they sometimes mutter, "It's time to blow up HR." Harsh. They believe that effective HR is crucial to effective organizations, but it needs to evolve and mature. That's why they said that it is time to grow up HR so that it evolves to meet the real needs of the business. In most best-of-breed organizations today, HR is taking on an even greater role. And indeed, HR is becoming a prerequisite competency for leadership, functional and operational decision-making, and strategic planning. So again, this is a question I can pose to both our CEOs and our HR leaders. I'll start with our HR leaders. With the concept of blowing up HR, that might be certainly to one extreme. The better question might be, how do you think HR might change and or evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? That could be in terms of structure, it could be in terms of where it is more closely aligned in the organization. I'd be interested to know kind of what you see as the potential future of HR. Yeah.
You can go.
Don't be shy.
Okay, so I think you're saying that I kind of see as HR has evolved since I started in HR. I remember when I was leaving marketing and sales and talking to my father and say, I think I'm liking this HR thing. And he's like, personnel? You're going to personnel? No, HR. Personnel? You're going to personnel? And so he thought of me in the back office, with a hat on and kind of writing people's checks. And so I think that was his interpretation. So it's evolved, and I think a lot of businesses have evolved in areas. I think for me, HR seems to be better as a function of every role. And so less of a department massive. I remember I worked for Baxter Healthcare, and when I first walked through floors and floors of HR people, and I kept on saying, did they do anything else here but HR? And I think that's got to get smaller. I think it got to get it out to where the individuals are dealing with people. So I think it becomes more of a consultative role in a way in which you're helping people understand how to take that toolkit you have and make it real for them in the process. So I think HR gets smaller from a function, but gets bigger in the business.
Excellent. Mary Beth, do you have anything?
You know, it's interesting because I'm answering this both from my perspective of at Jellyvision doing HR, but also Jellyvision makes products. So like Alex, our benefits counselor, and we have a financial wellness product that help companies take care of their people. And I think, so I'm kind of coming at it from both directions of, I think what's changing is a lot of traditional HR functions that are bureaucratic are being replaced by technology. And which is fantastic, right? Because then it frees up the bandwidth to be doing more of the talent acquisition and retention. And I think there's a recognition with, kind of the real push for physical wellness, like understanding that we want our employees to be physically well so they can be well in their lives and well at work. Financial wellness, recognizing that we want our employees to not be up at night worrying about money. We want them up at night worrying about our business issues. No, we want them sleeping well at night. But I think technology is really going to free HR up to be much more about the talent war, which really is, how are we getting the right people? How are we taking care of them? But in a much less bureaucratic and in a much more innovative way, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the future.
I'll just pony on to her. I spend a lot of time talking to HR executives who control over $1 billion of benefit spend every year, and they can impact shareholder price if they do their jobs well and they know it. So I don't see this perception of HR ever, and I'm in the market all the time talking to leaders of Fortune 1000 companies. To me, I would just make a suggestion that maybe we could work together to sort of reduce the compliance burden. I see HR people absolutely overwhelmed with compliance and reporting, and if we can figure out how to automate that, then like the ACA is just incredible burdens of paperwork and checking and things like that. If we minimize that as a country, it's not companies, it's a country, has created a ridiculous amount of compliance for this department, then maybe they could focus more on being strategists and using their intuition to connect to better business ideas. But I think it starts with what a mountain of compliance and reporting we've created for this function.
I see a path.
No, please.
Yeah, path. Two things strike me as I look down the road. Number one is making HR more visible, if you will, to the entire company. So I've worked when I was with Aetna, and it's not meant to be disparaging in any way, just as a large company, we had a model where HR was centralized in different regions. Then the plans themselves, you were connected by being an HR partner, if you will. You had HR partners. Many, many years that I was there, I can tell you I never personally met my HR partner, many phone calls. And to me, that was not an optimal way to do business. So if I, as a CEO, had not met my business partners, you can imagine that it was probably zero that many of our other associates had that opportunity. And many of them likened it to being called into the principal's office. When HR came up, it was never a good thing, unfortunately. And we were pushed to read things about policies in that way. The connectivity wasn't there. So I'm a big believer now of ensuring going down a path where HR and the managers there are very visible to the employees, and something that is an inviting environment in that way, and they're proactive in pushing information out. So that was a redirection from one experience to where I see the road going now.
Yeah. Jeff.
We're going to be in a position of having about 2,000 people working in manufacturing facilities, making critical life or death drugs. How do we keep those people motivated? I mean, it's easy to talk about our white collar workers, but here's a bunch of people that are going to be every day doing the same thing. It's an important thing. I think that the function, your function, is going to be extremely important. how do we keep them motivated? How do we keep them happy? What else do we have to do? How do you make a situation like that, exciting and rewarding? We have always given all of our employees stock options, but to be honest, at that level, it's very, very difficult for them to understand and to really get the benefit. So one of the biggest challenges I have as I'm facing this new is how do I keep those people motivated? Particularly in China, when the more success you get, the more you lose your people. I had an incredible HR person and an incredible plant manager. We built a greenfield facility in Chengdu, China. And the way it works is real simple. Once it gets approved, the vultures circle and you lose 50% of your people because all of a sudden you've had a greenfield project that you not only got FDA approved, but you started getting products approved. And as you know, we lost, out of about 400 people, we lost about 3 people. And that was a real testament to our management team, but more importantly, to the gal that ran the HR that was in the plant all the time, talking to the people, making them feel they were important because they were. So that's the real challenge that I'm going to have as we move forward, a big challenge.
Okay. There's another report, it's out called Partnering for Performance, the CFO and HR. And it's about bridging the gap between HR and finance functions, or enhancing the understanding of each other and increasing their level of collaboration, and how that will lead to better business performance and stronger improvement across a range of human capital metrics, including employee engagement and productivity. So when you think about the aspect of HR growing up and learning how to talk, finance is a language that most organizations and boardrooms use to communicate. HR leaders need to master this language and be able to translate what they do to show how HR impacts the organizational results. Technology and analytics are needed to translate data because deciding on human capital value is no different from deciding on capital investments in the business with an expected return on the investment. HR is not always about cost, but about actual people and the operational, strategic, financial, and non-financial risks inherent in having the wrong talent. Once HR masters the language of the organization, it will be able to measure the impact it has and prove its contribution was worth the investment. So, I'm going to pose this question to our CEOs. How has your HR leadership demonstrated their ability to speak the language of finance and share their impact on the organization? I'll start with you, Bob.
Okay. I'd like to start with, I would adopt Jeff's. I hear he spent $2 over the last 5 years on HR. My CFO would love to hear those kinds of numbers. That's the best practice. Just kidding that. Yeah. Over the 2 years that I've been with CCI, I'd like to personalize it because Jason and I and his team have built a relationship over that time, and clearly has demonstrated. I used the word earlier, analytics. I do use analytics a lot, and I think it is and has a front and center role in terms of looking at the value proposition and return on investment for the decisions that they make, for who they bring in, and more importantly, getting over the lifetime of their connection, what that return is. And we all know losing people is a very costly proposition. There are huge upfront investments that we all make in bringing somebody onto the business. So you would really like to amortize that somewhat over time. So it's a constant discussion that needs to go forth. So what I've seen happen over that time is, now that Jason and I have built that trust relationship, if you will, that he comes armed and we have those discussions as we're looking either through the budget cycle itself, but even more important, the ongoing decision that where you're constantly priming that pump and bringing people in, that he does bring with him, very prepared, the kinds of arguments and supportive documentation that's necessary to tell the story. So it doesn't take a lot for him to have to wring my arm or convince me. He brings that with him in a very illuminating way. So that also extends, as I talk, that he should be just an extension of me or any other senior leadership in doing that. And so over that time, as we've seen that evolve, he knows how important that is. And when we're in those senior leadership meetings, I should not do a lot of talking. I'm not big on doing a lot of talking. It is the opportunity for him to connect with the other senior leaders in making those types of presentations and let it go for themselves. So I've seen evolution. It will continue to grow in that regard, and it's a very integral part of who we are in building our success and developing our talent internally and growing that talent.
I don't know if I want Mary Beth to sound like our CFO. I have a CFO who sounds like a CFO. You know, as much as she's a business partner, when we have problems, when we're growing, when we analyze why we're growing, she's there with her perspective and her 360 view and her dot connecting and her intuition. But we actually probably measure a lot less than most companies, and I'll tell you why. The second you start to measure it, people start to think it's important. So if we said, what is our time to close searches? Are we suddenly creating a perverse incentive to close searches faster when what's most important is closing searches well? So I think that I'm a terrible person to answer this because I actually don't want Mary Beth to sound like a CFO. I want her to sound like the senior vice president of people, which she is, which is looking at the value being created for business, looking at things like culture, looking at things like where we're having trouble sourcing. But I don't need her to count beans. I have a team of people counting beans. So I don't think I would ask you to do that job.
Okay.
I totally agree with Amanda, but the last 5 companies I've had are public companies. And everyone in a public company has to understand that when I have to give the earnings call, the one thing that should be clear is that there is no excuse for not making the number. And the entire organization has to understand that there's no excuse. If your main plant burned down, you should have had a secondary plant. If your raw material source disappeared, you should have had. I mean, so one of the jobs of all of the professionals is to make the company realize that when we make a commitment, it has to happen. In John's case, I did not want John to be. I had a very strong CFO, a very strong financial group. But what I wanted John to do is to make everybody realize this is the commitment that we made, and it's certainly within his purview to be able to say, you're falling behind a little bit here, and if I were you, if you need help, let us know, because we've got to make the number. And the one thing after having taken 5 companies public, you don't want to do an earnings report where you are giving bad news. There's nothing worse. So that's how.
My perspective, and I just want to respond to that, why I would not expect Jason or anyone in that position to be, quote unquote, a CFO, but because of the round table and the absolute equity that I want around that table for all, it's very important that he's able to engage and have those conversations at that level and understand when the CFO is speaking, that he can connect and understand what those concerns are. And I'd like to have an equal footing, so whether it's my COO, my chief marketing officer, wherever, my chief medical officer, VP, that they have enough that they feel comfortable in having those conversations. At the end of the day, in a company like mine and most companies, there are limited resources. And as we're doing our strategic financial planning to ensure that you have the representation that's you feel is necessary to carry out those obligations. There is some value in being able to speak those languages and feel that you can carry on the conversations at the level. I have a very strong CFO. Would not expect that he has the same knowledge and the experience that comes with that, but minimally can engage in a reasonable conversation with that CFO and make a case, as will all of his peers be making a case around that table as we're developing plans on allocating those scarce resources.
And I'll come back. I think there's a difference between being a partner in growth and a partner in the solvency of the business, meaning you spend less than you earn. But I don't ask Mary Beth to say, like, there are all kinds of interesting metrics that can help, like revenue per employee, cost per hire, time to hire, really having a dashboard mindset. And I more just want her focused on the right people in the right position as quickly as you can, but not with some like, if it's not in 90 days, you failed, or it's not in 30 days, you failed. So I think it's a partner in growth is anyone at the executive table, whether they're a lawyer or IT or HR or marketing, I think.
Would you see that there may be different practices that work for different industries differently? Again, I look at our trajectory and I feel that the model we've adopted has served us well in that regard. I mean, the growth that we've experienced has been in large part using that model. So we keep our eyes open to other alternatives as you grow. But in the 18 months that I talked about here, and you know things can be fleeting, can change very quickly, but we've gone from ground zero to being the fastest growing, and I attribute a lot of that to the model that we've adopted in terms of the roundtabling that we do. So it's probably one size does not fit all, and you have to decide what works best for your own business model. Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Some of you in the room may have heard the name Ram Charan. He's a world-renowned business advisor, author, speaker. He's worked with a number of CEOs of very large organizations around the globe. And in a conversation where he was engaged about the trends of CHROs, he talked about the importance of CHROs today having been in the business at some point in time in their career and not just exclusively in HR. So whether they came from finance or they came from sales or they came from R&D, whatever the case may be, that they have spent time in the business and understand the business, and that those CHROs were better suited in their positions because of that experience than someone who may not have spent time in the business. Do you agree or disagree with that?
That's sort of like the Six Sigma approach. Like, to manage the factory, you have to do each job yourself and get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
I think that can be helpful perspective, but rather than just being a worker in our business, I like people who are students of the world. I feel like as innovative as we are and as fast moving as we are, we don't invent problems. We kind of have the problems of any company of scale, of certain size. So I'm much more interested in who's already blazed a trail and what can we learn from them so we make fewer of our own mistakes. So no, Mary Beth was a lawyer, but she had learned how to learn. She had a good compass, and she's intuitive. A dot connector can apply facts to, I think we should do this. And I think that made her well suited for the job versus the fact that she coded or was a full stack developer at Jellyvision. So just in our experience, that wasn't a prerequisite. But we're also not a
Good, because I cannot.
yeah. Yeah, but we're not a Fortune 500 company with a CHRO.
Yeah. Jeff, how about from your perspective?
We're probably the most heavily government-regulated industry that there is. I mean, everything that we do, every supplier, every piece of equipment, it's not important that I don't think anyone would ever have any reason to go into HR if you're going to be really an expert in regulatory or quality or in John's case again, I viewed him as a businessman who had some HR background. And as a businessman, he had to learn, anyone that enters our industry has to learn a lot of things. To start out with how you even pronounce the name of the products. It's sort of important that you can do that, otherwise you lose a little bit of credibility. So he didn't talk about products for a long time until he got to that point. So not important, but have the ability to be able to learn and to interact with the people.
Yeah. I'm going to say, as I said before, absolutely not in my view. And it may be helpful, I don't know scientifically what the studies show, but as I sit here today, and it's the honest truth, I don't know Jason's real background. If you were to ask me today and challenge me, has his whole career been in HR? I don't know. I know he does a wonderful job at what he does, and that he was the right person and a great fit for that position. So he probably brought in a myriad of experiences that were the proper fit for a company, would connect in so many different ways. And so my entire approach, not just in the HR arena, but across the company, said earlier, that is not a prerequisite when you come to say, I'm not going to do that checklist and do you have this, have that later on. It's about that connectivity and your passion and your understand about what our mission and our vision is for our company.
Very good. All good? All right. We've got about 15 minutes left, so we're going to take the last two questions are going to be posed to both our HR leaders as well as our CEOs. and it's about advice. So for the people in the room, and I'm going to start with our HR leaders. For the folks in the room, you think about the experiences you've had, you think about the path that you've traveled, and the role that you have now. If there's someone in this room who's not at that point yet, what is that one, or it could be more than one, piece of advice that you would want to offer that individual that you think, if someone had just told me that, right? When I was starting out my HR career, what would that one piece of advice be? All right, Jason.
I'll go first.
All right.
I think Bob hit on it a while back. Trust, honesty, building that rapport with your CEO, really understanding what his challenges are within the business and how HR can kind of fit in with the business objectives. So I think trust and honesty are going to go hand in hand, but also just building that rapport. It's not necessarily going to lunch, but I stop in his office, I don't know, 3-4 times a week, just to talk about some stuff that are not about business, but kind of building that personal relationship as well. And then we can get into the business talk. We can get into some of his challenges and things of that sort. I also do the same thing with Keith. He usually has to kick me out of his office because I'm always asking him a whole bunch of questions about what's going on in the business, what it is that I can do to help him out. And sometimes he's a little cranky, but we get past that very quickly. But I get a better understanding of who he is as a person, as well as Bob, and then also what I can do to kind of help him in his business and whatever challenges that he might have. So just building that personal relationship, that rapport, and having that connection with the CEO.
Very good. Mary Beth will put you on that one bit of advice.
I think ask why is my biggest piece of advice. And I think in organizations where HR doesn't have, we're talking to people who really do have HR at the table. I think organizations that view it as, here's this new thing, just roll it out. Here's who we need to hire, just go get them. Asking why. Why are we hiring this person? And I have to do this with my hiring manager. Somebody's going to leave, and okay, we need to replace them. And they just want to pull out whatever job description they used last time, and you have to say, wait a minute, why? Why? Why are they leaving? Did they outgrow the job? Do you need somebody at that level of seniority? What's your biggest need right now? Should we hire that role, or should we not replace that person and hire another thing with that money, another role that's going to be more important to you? And so rather than being an executor, ask why you're doing things so you can propose alternatives. And I think that's the way. If you've got an organization that just views you as, we tell you what to do, now go do it. If you can ask intelligent questions and make suggestions about how to do things differently, that's how you're going to open it up to saying, oh, you're not just an execution department. We really need you at the table from the outset to figure out what we're doing.
Very good. John?
I think there's probably two areas that have helped me. One is, build a strong relationship and a confidential relationship with your leadership group that you can develop. I have great relationships with previous CEOs and previous bosses and colleagues that still call me and want to work through business ideas. And so if they can let their guard down with somebody, it should be HR behind closed doors. And not just from a personal, I have a problem with an employee, but hey, I'm really struggling being able to do this, and how do I get better? So become that coach and that confidant. And so I think that really builds a strong relationship. And I enjoy those relationships. It's rewarding for me as well. And I think a little bit on your ask why, it's very easy to hear someone who comes to you and say, here's what I want to do, and this is what you're going to do, and execute on it. Get them to stop and say, well, what are you trying to accomplish, and how can I help you? And start to work through the process with them, be a part of the solution. It's very easy, I think, for us all to get in, whether in HR or anything, to say no quickly because you've heard kind of do this. Well, no, you can't do that. Instead of saying, no, you can't do that, really open up and say, well, what are you trying to accomplish, and let's figure out a way together. So it's pretty simple.
Very good. Thank you. To our CEOs, I'd love to pose the same question. If you were to offer one bit of advice to the HR leaders that we have in the audience today on how to be the best HR leader and the best partner to the C-suite, what advice would you offer? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Our managers, we agree on what the objectives and what the philosophy is, and I empower our people to go out and do it. One of the things that that I think is essential to that process is having particularly the HR person coming in and saying, I think we have an issue here. I think the general feeling is this. I think all of us, and I'd be surprised if there's anybody up here, that many times people tell me what they think I want to hear, a vast majority of the time. And I like that to be tested, and the person that I'd like to test is the HR person. So I would really appreciate it if John said, I know we're going in this direction with quality, but I don't think it's working for these reasons. And he has to be careful in terms of confidentiality. I have to be careful in terms of confidentiality. But that gives me a chance to revisit the issue, reprioritize, potentially change, or at least reemphasize the importance of it. And in fast-growing, and we talked about cranes. I was #1 in cranes in 11, I think. In 12, I was #3 fastest-growing company. And you just can't be with everybody all the time, and my HR person was very important to say, we got a problem in these 3 areas. I think you can really help, and as long as it's productive, it's great for the organization.
Bob, how about you?
Jason said it well. I'll just extend a little. It's developing that relationship, encouraging to have an open and transparent relationship, but also I think much is to be confident in what you bring to the table. There's a reason why I or a CEO has hired you in such a very important position, because of the confidence that we have and what we feel you have brought, either by way of experience and those things that we haven't even developed yet, but looking down the road, I know where we want to get that business, and the decision was that you're going to help get us there as well. So I just be confident in what you, and do not be concerned about expressing that confidence through that relationship that you built. For me, it's an expectation of you being part of that team, to be an active participant in those discussions along the way.
Very good.
I think executives can get tunnel vision. Your problems feel like they're the most important problems in the world, and you're just staring at them like this. And so I would suggest for HR, the real value would be become a foil for outside perspective and expertise. So if someone in one department is struggling with, for example, say a toxic employee, be able to storytell about what another department did and sort of help connect the dots by getting people away from the problem they're staring at like this, so they can come back with a little bit more distance and perspective. Know what's going on in companies outside of your own. Know what's going on in your industry, what's going on in other industries. It's interesting, and be able to provide that. It's like, look over here for a second and get this wisdom, and then come back and you'll have a little bit more breathing room between you and your problem, so you can look at it more clearly. Just that outside foil of perspective and wisdom, I think, would be the aspiration for HR.
Very good. So thank you so much, CEOs and our HR leaders, for all of your insight today. I think we've heard a lot of really great ideas and talking points. We've heard about be an innovator. We've heard about be a business person. We've heard about the importance of communication. I think we've heard the importance of speaking up, asking questions, using your intuition, let it serve you when you feel it tingling, and don't be afraid to step forward. So thank you again for all the information you shared. What I'd like to do is open it up to about a 15-minute Q&A session. So if you have a question, certainly raise your hand, excuse me, and we'll go through the room, and then we'll wrap up with some closing remarks. So I'll open it up. Yes? Yeah.
What are the characteristics of a fully formed adult?
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, what is a fully formed adult? That's Netflix word, and I've talked to them about it. Most importantly, I think it comes down to confidence. People who make really bad decisions at work are usually not kind and generous and secure, they're insecure. So Netflix looks for secure, confident individuals who make decisions with empathy and integrity. So fully formed is being confident in yourself, not insecure, being able to say, I failed, I made a mistake, and I'm okay with that, let me share what I learned, versus always being defensive and trying to hide. Fully formed is about emotional EQ more than it is an executive with X number of years of experience. It's about EQ versus IQ.
Great. Awesome. answered all of your questions, huh? It was that good today. All right. Yes.
Yes, this is for everyone, but Jeffrey, you had mentioned earlier that the whole organization is responsible for hitting the number. You're doing your quarterly earnings report. And one of the things that the CEO of my organization always professes that whether you have it by title or not, everyone in the organization is in sales. And I wanted to just get your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. In order for you, we were talking about getting into the C-suite, you better be a damn good salesperson, because that's how you get into the C-suite. There has to be a reason. I have so much time in the day, and if I'm going to give you time, it's got to be, it's got to be time that's well spent. So everyone is a salesperson, and again, everyone knows what the earnings per share number is from the beginning of the quarter to the last day, and we all work together to make sure it happens. So, because it's catastrophic if it doesn't happen.
I think there have been great quotes about everyone's in sales. Recruiting is definitely sales, marketing is sales, all that good stuff. But I think we talk about it more as holistically. If the product isn't innovative, it's harder for sales to hit their numbers. If the marketing isn't generating leads, it's harder for sales to hit their numbers. If recruiting doesn't bring in enough people, it's harder for sales to hit their numbers. So rather than saying that everybody's in sales, everyone has to do their job for sales to be able to hit their numbers. We really believe in collective compensation. We're all in this together versus some are rewarded. It's like we're all rewarded. We all have equity. We all are sort of it together, because if any one function falls down, sales can't hit their numbers. It is a team sport versus, I think we talk more about it that everybody is a team towards sales hitting their numbers versus we're all in sales. Because product people need to build beautiful, elegant, highly functioning, dazzling product, and then sales will hit their numbers.
The only thing I would add on that is whether it's innovative, whether it's, once the number is etched in granite, it's the number. Do you follow what I'm saying? It doesn't matter. That's the number. And if it wasn't realistic, you shouldn't have made the commitment. So again, from a public company standpoint, everyone in the organization has to realize that we've now committed to these things. It has to happen. There's no alternative. It has to happen.
In our arena, it may be slightly different because we also, I know Jeff said he's in a regulated, I feel in the healthcare industry, we probably are 1A in terms of regulation, because we're regulated by so many different, so the state level, the city level, the county level, the federal level, CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, so much regulation. So our product is bringing people in. We don't sell a product, if you will, but we are all customer service. That's the connection, that we all must provide the highest level of customers to ensure that we are selected over others. A little bit of specialization in our area is because we have medical individuals, so we have a chief medical officer. That person has to be a licensed physician, if you will, so it limits what flexibility you have there. I cannot do the job of a physician. I'm not licensed to do that. So in that regard, as you do search for talent, I didn't touch on it before, in that area and with registered nurses and others, there's a certain selectivity requirement that occurs in talent procurement that limits itself by that very nature of what we are absolutely required to do by our contracts, be it with the federal government or the state government itself.
Very good. Any other questions? Nope. And I think, so let me formally again, thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for joining us today, sharing your insights, to our HR leaders, their respective HR leaders, thank you so much for your insight and input as well. We have just a few announcements, and then we may, our panelists may stick around for a few minutes, so if you have some questions, feel free to approach the stage when we're all wrapped up here. First and foremost, we have one of our organizations that we partner with, Added Incentives. One of our vendors was very kind enough to donate we have like a messenger bag briefcase today. It is filled with all sorts of Steely Group swag. And my esteemed colleague, Denise Kowalski, has picked a name from our list of attendees today. Dominique McSwain from AbbVie. Where's Dominique? There she is. There you go. You're welcome. Enjoy. Enjoy. A couple other announcements. All of you will have in front of you a feedback sheet. If you'd be so kind as to complete that, it'll just take a couple of moments. Your input really does help us quite a bit as we put together these presentations for you. So we really appreciate any feedback you can provide. Additionally, if you are interested in getting HRCI credit for today's event, the event is giving credit, is it 1.5 hours, Denise? 2 hours, 2 credit hours. So feel free to see Denise or Cindy Mitchell on your way out, and they will provide you with the appropriate sheet for you to turn in. Let's see here. Our next event will be in the fall, most likely in October. So stay tuned to our website and our blog for further information on that. We referenced a lot of studies and paperwork today during our event, and Denise is going to have all of those. She'll have links to all of those studies, and including the Netflix one, on our website probably later today, right?
By the end of the week.
Okay. By the end of the week. And what am I missing? Kevin, thank you. Kevin Dopkin from Career Builder, thank you so much for sponsoring and being a partner to the Steely Group today. We appreciate your ongoing support of our organization. So with that, we're all done. Thank you so much for attending. We hope you had a great experience.